Students, today we will learn something on the importance of the study of age and sex structure. The major aim of this today's class will be to understand what is the importance of studying age and sex structure and what is the importance of age and sex structure in the context of India, as well as we will also look at some of the age and sex structure data as well as how actually represent this in a population. So, all of you might have already learned what is demographic transition, and the demographic transition also lead to something called an age structure changes, which is generally known as age sex structure transition, because each of the demographic transition stages has a specific age sex structure. So, that is why actually, as I told you earlier, demographic transition directly lead you to an age structure transition. And you should also remember that age and sex are among the most fundamental demographic characteristics of any human population. So, unless you know these two characteristics, you will not be able to learn many of other aspects of the population characteristics, whether it is fertility, whether it is mortality, whether it is migration, and many other related human characteristics. So, that is why actually age and sex structure plays such an important role in the demographic changes and also for the society. So, let us now look at the importance of the study of age structure changes. The economic and cultural life of any society is critically dependent upon the age and sex structure of the population. We will come back to that, because how actually age changes and then how actually it critically influences the economic life of the population as well as the cultural life of the population. And for any country, if you look at the planning process, they have to critically take into consideration the age and sex structure, because for planning, unless you know the age, what are the characteristics of this age of this population, what is the sex composition of this population, you would not be able to take into consideration the planning process. So, that is very, very important for any country. That is the second very important aspect of this age and sex structure. And thirdly, it has a direct implications for the development of any economy and culture as well as for its individual region, because as we already told, economic development of any country has a direct implications because of the age structure. It means age directly influences the economic growth of any country. Even the culture, because if a country is young or if a country is old, that has its own impact on its culture, and also for its individual region, how actually each region behaves, each region develops, each region integrates with the other regions of the same country of the world, all depends on the age and sex structure of the population. That way, I think this is the one of the important characteristics, demographic characteristics that one has to take into consideration. The fourth important aspect of the age and sex structure is this information is widely used for many developed countries and international agencies to know the population distribution. As all of you know, population distribution, which we will come back to that later, how actually it has to be defined, it has very critical impact for the country, for the region, for the international level. So, actually that will be crucially looked at by various agencies, whether it is developed countries, whether it is international agencies like UN, World Bank, or any other international agencies. Finally, the population projection, which is vitally important to understand the future scenario of the population, its characteristics, needs sex and age structure of the population. Unless you have that information, you really cannot project population, because the future fertility of a country, of a region, of any place will depend on the current age and sex structure of the population. So naturally, for population projection, you need to take this aspect into consideration. So that is the yet another most important aspect of the age and sex structure, or importance of the age and sex structure. That way we have seen several importance of studying age and sex structure in any population. So unless you critically look at these demographic characteristics, it is actually important to understand what is the economic life of the people, what is the cultural life of the people, what is the social life of the people, how actually society behaves, why in certain societies even the things like there are more violence, or why some certain societies are very peaceful. All these things has some impact because of the age structure of the population, sex structure of the population, and also how actually it is distributed. That is why all of us, whether it is an individually at the family level, or family living at the society, or the society living at the state, or state living at the national and international, integrated into national and international level, has to look at age and sex structure of the population to understand how actually our society will be behaving for the future. So let us also now learn some of the usefulness of this data, because this data is often given from various sources, and how actually how it will be useful for understanding the society. The first major usefulness of the age and sex data is that it conveys the relative number of the child, young, old, as well as the balance between men and women at different ages. Very easy to understand how actually important, or how important is to understand what is the proportion of a child in the society, what is the proportion of old people in the society, what is the proportion of the adult or younger age group in the society, which actually contribute to the economic development of a nation. So, and also it also tells you the balance between men and women, because we all expect that men and women has to be balanced in any society. So if that balance is broken, that balance is biased, then actually we need to look at what is really happening to the society. So that is the first major usefulness of this data, to understand that we get the information on the relative importance of the people at different age groups, and also the balance between men and women. Secondly, this yet another usefulness is that all population characteristics vary significantly with different ages. As I told you, population characteristics are basically fertility, mortality, and migration. So these characteristics vary significantly with what is your age distribution, meaning that in a migration situation, it is the adult who migrate more. So if we have a large number of adult population in a adult age group population in the larger population, then there will be more migration in that society. Or the adult also gives birth to the next generation. So if there are large adults in a society, there will be more births in the society. But the death rate will be high in the older ages. So naturally, if there are high proportion of people in the older ages, then you will have high death rate. So these are all interlinked factors. So that is the another major usefulness, to really understand what is the population characteristics by looking at what is the age and sex structure. And third important characteristics or usefulness of the age and sex structure is that it is a component of the population analysis, meaning most of the demographic analysis are based on age and sex structure of the population, because demographic analysis cannot be done without age and sex structure. Age is such a critical important aspect of a demographic variable. So we need to really understand how important is this data to understand the other aspect of any demographic process. Fourth important usefulness of the age and sex structure data is that the future of the population growth are critically depend on the age and sex structure. I have already told you in the importance when we were discussing on the importance of the age and sex structure also, that future population projection or future population growth, future population characteristics all depend on the current age and sex structure of the population or the past age and sex structure of the population. So, that way you will understand that unless you have this information, actually it is really important to understand many demographic characteristics, many future aspects of the population, also many other socio-economic aspects of the population in future. So, that way age and structure is very highly useful information which is available for the society, for the people, for the country, for the planners to look at and to analyze and then draw valuable conclusions. We have also certain other usefulness for this age and sex structure data. One will be its usefulness is noticeable when you cross classified by variables like marital status, literacy and economic activity and other economic and social aspects, because we will know that people get married at a particular ages and there are possibilities of marital disturbances, there can be widowhood, there can be widowers, there can be even educational aspect, we can be educated at younger ages, but then if you do not get educated you may remain illiterate, and your economic activity, if you remain unemployed and later ages it may be difficult for you to get employment. So, various aspects has to be looked in if you cross classify the data of other economic and social data by age, which give you very vital information on what is really happening in the society. Apart from that, there are also other usefulness like purely demographic concerns. The age sex data structure is required for age specific analysis of data for planning, scientific and technical and commercial purposes. So, in that way actually whether it is scientific analysis, whether it is planning, whether it is commercial purposes, whether it is pure economic aspects like trade and balance of payment, all these aspects also has to take into consideration the age and sex structure of the population. So, that way we really understood what is actually the importance of this data, what is the usefulness of this data for the society, and how actually encompassing this data to understand various economic, social, cultural, household, family and other aspects in a society. So, since this data is so important, we need to now learn how to understand this data, how to look at this data, how to classify this data, how to analyze this data, and then how to draw conclusions from this data. So, the rest of my lecture I will really talk on how to understand age structure data, how to analyze this data, and what are the patterns which we see in countries like India on age structure data. So, let us come back to the next one on understanding the age structure data. How do you usually understand the age structure data? The simplest way to understand age structure data is to classify the population by different age group. Normally, we classify the population into three broad age groups. As I told you, first is children, and second is adults, and third is elderly. Children normally in any population is defined as the group of people who are less than 15 years of age. Less than 15 means it is from 0 ages to 14 ages. So, once they complete 15 years, then they will be considered as adult. Normally, adult in any population is considered within the age group of 15 to 59 or 15 to, in some countries it is 15 to 64 age group. In India, mostly our adult age group is considered as 15 to 59 age group. So, once you become 60, you have been classified as elderly or old age, and elderly is definitely it is 60 and above age group, or in some countries classify them 65 and older age groups, but in general it is actually after when beyond your working age group, because adults you are expected to be working, elderly you are retiring, and you are actually leading a life which is beyond, because your period of economic activity or economic work participation is completed. As I told you, each of this age group has different characteristics. So, one can calculate the proportion of each of this age group. What is the proportion of children in a society? What is the proportion of adults in a society? What is the proportion of old age or elderly in a society? Children are considered to be population below age group, as I told you, and the another way of actually depicting the age structure characteristics of a population is by calculating what is generally known as dependency ratio. Dependency ratio by the word itself mean that there are some people who are dependent, some people actually support them. Who are dependent? Generally, the children who are less than 14 years of age, who has to be dependent because they have to be supported by someone, they cannot support themselves, and even elderly who are 60 above or 65 years older, who also may not be contributing to the economy, who will not be able to work, so someone has to support them. So, who has to support them? They have to be supported by the people who are in the adult ages, who are working. So, that is number of people or the proportion of people in the age group 15 to 64 or 15 to 59. So, dependency ratio simply means it is a ratio of people who are not working divided by the people who are working, because we do not look at the work participation per se. We will define it as the people who are less than 14, we know that most of them will not be working, and people who are 60 plus or 65 plus divided by the people who are working. We expect that 15 to 64 or 15 to 60, 59, everyone will be working. So, that is how the dependency ratio is defined, because we are not specifically looking into the work participation of the people. If you look at the work participation of the people, perhaps you can even adjust for that, but usually dependency ratio does not look at it. It is just a division of the population of the people who are not working, in the assuming that 0 to 14 and 65 and above, divided by the number of people between 15 and 64. The another common way of understanding age structure or depicting the age structure is something known as population pyramids or age sex pyramids. It is merely a graphical display of age and sex information, but it gives you a very good idea about actually what is really happening in the age structure of the population or sex structure of the population, and it clearly improves the understanding of the age and sex structure. So, it also very easy for comparison, because one can really compare one country's age structure with another country's age structure if you look at the age sex pyramid and then draw valuable conclusions from that pyramid. They are also potentially very informative to understand the history of a population and its future characteristics. As I already told you, age and sex structure of a population today was because of the certain characteristics of the population like fertility, mortality and migration in the past. So, naturally, if you know what is the age pyramid of a country today, it gives you valuable information of the past population characteristics. How to read a pyramid, that is what we will have to understand. Before I show you some age sex pyramid, I will also give you how actually one has to read this age sex pyramid. Simply, if you say age sex pyramid or population pyramid is a histogram placed in both sides, usually it is left side is male and right side is female. So, it is an x axis and it has a y axis. The left side of the pyramid, which will show you a histogram, and the right side of the pyramid will give you another histogram for two different sexes. It can be presented in absolute numbers or even in percentages. So, it means that it is actually, you can label your x axis based on whether you are presenting in absolute numbers or whether you are presenting it is in the percentages, and it must be calculated for each age and sex group from the total population for male and female separately. So, it means actually for usually it is calculated for each 5 age groups. Maybe at the last final ages you may say 80 plus or 100 plus or 90 plus or something. Otherwise, for each 5 age group it is computed. Age is depicted on the y axis with the youngest at the bottom and the oldest at the top. So, youngest age group you start with and then progressively go up by considering what is the age group depicted. And the scale can be in single or 5 age groups depending on the precision you need. Usually it is computed for 5 age group, even it can be computed for single age group, that is also possible, but normally we take 5 age group because single age group is enormous kind of number. So, if you have 5 age group, it is easy for you to understand what is really happening at different age groups other than at different ages. It must be of equal width apart from, as I told you, last open ended age group. That is the most important thing one has to look at. So, unless if it is equal width, it is difficult for you to comparison. So, what is really happening the previous age group to the next age group, you would not be able to compare, especially when you are dealing with the numbers or population numbers or even at the percentages. Finally, normally the statistics for males are plotted on the left, as I told you, and the females are on the right. So, you would get a good idea actually what is really happening on the left side and right side, and also it gives you a very good comparison of the sex distribution. Now, I am going to give you an example of 3 age pyramids. It is interesting. There are 3 different patterns. Please look at the graph. You can see one is called rapid growth, the second is called the slow growth, and the third is called the negative growth. How do you know this negative growth, or how do you know is rapid growth? Look at the first one. This is sort of triangle in shape. What does it mean? It means that at younger ages you have more people compared to the other ages. 0 to 4 has maximum number of people and 5 to 9 is slightly lower, 10 to 14 is even lower. Why it is lower? Because more people are born and some of them will die. So, it means that the next age group they will have less number of people, and next age group there will be less number of people. So, it is typically a triangle shape, a pyramid. But the second one, you would see a different pattern which is called a slow growth. Yeah, you will see the slow growth. There are far less number of people, not considerably less, but still less number of people compared to the, if you compare it with the 15 to 19 or 20 to 24 age group, even compared to 50 to 54 or 50 to 59 age group. What does it indicate? It indicates that in the past we had higher number of children or higher birth rate compared to currently the birth rate is low, which is known as the slow growth. The population is growing slowly. And the last one, if you look at, it is much more important, interesting, because it is the people at the younger ages is far less compared to the other age group, because we look at 40 to 44, 45 to 49 or even 50 to 54, they are far more in number compared to the current age group, that is 0 to 4, which has the birth which happened in the last 4 years, which is far less, which sort of showing or sort of indicating that actually that population may have a negative growth rate. The population, the birth rate is so low even compared to what is really happening to the death rate, because most of the people are concentrated toward the older ages where the death rate will be high. So, naturally you have a population growth which is sort of negative. So, this is 3 different patterns of the age pyramid, which gives you a clear understanding what is really happening to the age sex structure of a country. So, the left side is represented by male of a pyramid and the right side of the pyramid is represented by the females. So, you would also know what is the sex composition of the population. But the examples which we have shown here, actually there is not significant problem in the sex composition, except perhaps at the older ages we see there are more females than males, which is expected in because of the female advantage in mortality. Otherwise, it only tells you what is actually the age structure of the population, which has different implications. A rapid growth has one implication, slow growth has another implication, and negative growth has yet another implication. So, let us now come back to India and see what kind of age pyramid India represents. So, what kind of age distribution India represents. So, if you look at India, the latest census of India which shows in 2011, we have around 31% of the population in the country has been in the age group 0 to 14, that is child age group, younger age group. And we have almost 60% of the population, little over 60% of the population in the adult age group, that is 15 to 59 age group. And we have 8.5% of the population which is in the older age group. What does it show? Perhaps this is represented by a dependency ratio. It means that, what does it indicate? If you look at India up to 2015 based on the available projections, you would see 0 to 14 population proportion in India is started declining now. So, it is slowly, the proportion of 0 to 14 is coming down, and it may come down up to something around 2020 or so, and then it will be stable. That means India's fertility is rapidly declining now. So, naturally the proportion of population at the younger ages is coming down. So, once it comes down to a level, the birth rate will not decline much faster later. So, naturally it will stabilize somewhere. But in the older ages, India's population, which is represented by the triangle graph, line graph, so you can see actually it is going up and up. So, from 2000 onwards it is steadily increasing. So, when the proportion of population in the younger ages is coming down, the proportion of population in the older ages will be going up. And also we have also shown the dependency ratio here, which is dependency ratio is also coming down in India because the proportion of dependent, particularly at the younger ages, is now declining. So, India, if you represent by a pyramid, India's pyramid looks like this in 2011. What does it mean? It means India had a very high fertility in the past. So, naturally we have considerable number of people in the adult ages. Our old age is still very low, less number of people, because there are those people who are in the older ages are born almost 60 years or 70 years or 80 years back. So, when they had high mortality situation in the country, so many of them might not have survived. So, those who have survived are currently in that cohort. But the younger ages, if you look at the 0 to 4 age group population and 5 to 9 age group population, it's almost, you can say, similar, or even 0 to 4 is slightly coming less than 5 to 9, indicating that there is a birth rate decline in India, fertility transition in India, which is slowly taking place. So, we cannot say even we are in the middle, the second stage, we are actually inching towards the second stage of age structure transition. Definitely we are moving out of the first stage of the transition. A typical triangle pyramid we are not seeing now. The triangle pyramid has been transformed into something called a large adult population now. So, comparatively less population in younger ages, but in the coming years this might change, and we will also see more and more people in the adult ages and less people which are born in India because of the transition in the birth rate. We have already seen the importance of the age structure. So, we would once again look at some of the major importance of the age structure data and the age structure pyramid. So, what is the age structure pyramid data really tells you? One, it represents the number of people at a given age and sex in a society and is built from inputs from birth, death and migration at every ages. That is what we have learned already, because age sex structure of a population is completely dependent on the birth, the deaths and migration in any society. It is also an expression of the number of people found in each age group of population by sex. So, naturally age sex pyramid tells you the number of people or the proportion of people at different age groups by sex. It's a very good representation of that. Thirdly, all the rates and ratios in demography generated for either by age or sex or for both. That is important of age structure, because in demography without age and sex there are no analysis, you can say, because every analysis there should be age and sex is very vital characteristics of the demographic analysis. And fourthly, it helps in population projection and estimation of the future trends, which we have already seen, which is very useful for the planning purposes. Fifthly, it reflects the basic characteristics of the biological attributes of the population of a particular population that affect not only the demographic but the social, economic, political structure of a population over a period of about a century. So, that is the importance, because it affects all aspects of the population, whether it is social aspects, whether it is economic aspects, whether it is political structure, because only adults can vote in a country. So, if there are large proportion of adult age population, they will behave differently than large proportion of old age population in a society. And sixthly, it is the result of major interrelated factors such as fertility, mortality and migration, which have operated during the lifetime of the oldest inhabitant. So, if you have an age structure which is large number of people in adult, large number of people in old age, which means that in the past there has been a migration, there has been a mortality which really affected all this distribution. So, we will exactly know what was really happening in the past, because this is the reflection of the past rather than the present, the current age structure. Seventhly, it generally influences the birth and death rate and internal and international migration, marital status, composition, manpower, the gross national product, planning, because this has enormous impact on all those things. Current age structure determines the future birth rate, current age structure determines the future death rate, current age structure determines the internal and international migration, current age structure determines the marital status. If you have large number of people in the younger ages, they will not get married, but large number of people in the adult ages, they will be getting into marital union. So, all those things, and if you have large number of people in the adult ages, they will be contributing to the economy. So, your economy will grow. If you have large proportion of people in the younger ages, the economy also will not be growing that fast as in the adult ages. So, it has enormous impact on all aspects of economic, social, cultural, political life of the people. Eighthly, the age structure of the population estimates school age population, and also on that basis you have to arrive at number of education institutions you want, teachers you want, playground you want, textbooks you want. All this planning has to be made based on the age structure, because if the younger people are coming down, perhaps schools will become extra or teachers will become extra. But if in a population, if the birth rate is high, you might have to start new schools, new playgrounds, new amenities for the children. So, all this planning has to be based on the age structure of the population. And ninthly, estimation of field of social welfare, planning of social services, all these things have to be based on the age structure of the population. If large proportion of elderly, if you have to provide social welfare, social security systems to them, then we need to plan based on that. If you have to provide social security system to the mother and children, one has to plan for that. Tenthly, the attitude of the society towards children, the youth, elderly are also affected by the age distribution of the population. It is often found that actually a society's attitude, how actually the towards the people, towards the younger generation, towards the older generation also has an impact on the age structure of the population. And finally, it is population data are invariably classified by the age, sex and then made available to data users. All data on fertility, mortality, migration and marital status, economic characteristics are first presented separately for males and females and cross-classified by according to age. These are the major importance of the age structure. Then there are smaller importance, as I told you. There are, if based on the age structure, whether it is stationary, whether it is actually it's growing, whether it is influenced by elderly, it has its own effect in the long run for the society and the country. And we have also mentioned that for the business, for the sales and also for all other aspects, for planning, etc., it is vitally important to know the data on age and sex structure. So that is the today's lecture is all about. What is actually the importance of this important vital indicator of age and sex in the demography, and how these two demographic indicators really affects the all dimensions of economic, social, political, cultural life, religious life of the people. So that is what we have learned. It is the summary of this is that the population age and sex characteristics is fundamental to understand any process, whether it is demographic process of fertility, mortality, migration, whether it is economic process, whether all other aspects of life. And age structure population distribution is actually, you can use different methods. You can represent it by proportions of percentage of population. You can represent it by age pyramid, which is known as population pyramid, and which gives you a very good understanding of what is the type of age structure available or type of age structure transition which will take place in a society. It also tells you whether your population is young, whether your population is adult concentrated or your population is old age concentrated. It tells you whether actually your population is growing, whether population is declining growth, whether it is population is negative in growth. It also tells you what is the sex distribution at different ages and what is the sex composition of the people. So that way it gives you a very vital information on various aspects of the society. It also gives you lot of important aspects of the society on various aspects. I am sure you have understood what is, how vital or how important is to understand age and sex structure of the population. Find out the importance of it, look at how to represent an age pyramid, calculate some proportions using age and sex structure of any population, and then learn how to interpret it. Then you would know how vitally important is to understand. Maybe for your particular locality, maybe for your state, maybe for your country. Calculate it, compute it, represent it by age pyramid, and then learn more about it and understand how important this information is for the country, society and for the globe as a whole. Thank you.